Ooh, hello, thank you, welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming. My name is Justin Emeka. I'm the resident director of Pittsburgh Public Theatre. And I just wanna, but before we get into our conversation, just acknowledge we're in a really incredible space, bearing the name of an incredible man, but whose legacy just reflects so much more than just one individual. And all of us being here today, that we come into the room with different histories, and we represent more than just ourselves, right? So it's not just us in the room here, but there's everybody who got you here, and they're speaking through you and coming through you as we sit and start to reflect about what it means to be free and what it means to get us here to be free, right? This session, is just really a brainchild of mine, just in terms of thinking about having a conversation with incredible people. That's because that's the thing we like, right? I mean, we just like to just have a conversation with some incredible people. You can't get anything better than that, and get our juices flowing on these topics of starting, as a starting point, Juneteenth, because and August Wilson, right? Those two dynamic ideas. Juneteenth as an idea, and August Wilson as more than a man, but as an idea, as an aesthetic, as a legacy, as a tradition, right? With Juneteenth, we're still reflecting on what that means to be a national holiday. It happened so quick last year. I remember it was like 3 days before Juneteenth, it was also, okay, now it's a national holiday. And it was like, okay, what does that even mean for the nation? And I still don't really think a lot of people know, about what it means for it to be a national holiday. So I just felt like, let me get some sharp people in the room to think about that and to talk about that, right? So I just went out and, got some brilliant people, some of who I know and some of who I don't know, which is exciting for me. And so just before we get started, I'm gonna let them have a chance to speak, but just want to sing their praises a little bit. To my far right is Caroline Jackson Smith, who is the department chair of Oberlin College Theater and Africana Studies. Right, and Caroline's an incredible woman. She was one of my mentors. I also went to Oberlin. I teach at Oberlin College as well. I was a student. She was one of my mentors, and she was one of the people who introduced me to August Wilson, when I was a student there. So it's just wonderful to have her presence here. She's directed at least 6 of August Wilson's plays. She's directed at Karamu House, directed over the country. She's one of the premier Adrian Kennedy scholars and directors as well. Just a bright, incredible mind. And she also ran the Afro-American Cultural Center at Yale in the 80s when August Wilson was developing those early plays. So she got a vote and an eye towards that. Right? Then to my right here is brother Wally Jamal, right? He's an actor, incredible. He's in the current production of 2 Trains Running. If any of y'all happen to see it, it's running down the street. He plays West. But he's one of maybe the only actor in the country who's performed in all of August Wilson's plays, including How I Learned What I Learned, the one-man show.
In the world.
In the world.
Tell it right.
Tell it right. Right, help me out if I get anything wrong. Don't be afraid to jump on in. Right. But he's from Pittsburgh, and I'm directing the production of 2 Trains Running, and I came in, and he's been a valuable resource. He's just been kind of a guide for me in a lot of ways through the city, And one of the beautiful things about, Pittsburgh, if you come here and you talk to the people, is you really understand August Wilson's characters. Like if you talk to the black people in Pittsburgh, because they talk like August Wilson's characters. They do. And this brother right here, man, he tells story upon story upon story. So you're going to get a little feel. But, I just want to say that's kind of the beautiful thing, right? And to my left, right, I have E.G. Bailey, who is an extraordinary young filmmaker, writer, director, right? Filmmaker magazine recently named him one of the top 25 directors to watch and have an eye on. And he had the privilege of working with the late Marion McClinton as an associate director for 8 years, right? Minneapolis-based. So, a wonderful, wonderful young person, not young person, but emerging bright. Also, roots, so in Minneapolis, but roots from Liberia, yes? So coming, right? So also diasporic. And then keep going to the left is the incredible Shay Cage that maybe some of you all have already heard speak. Dynamic, incredible theater mind right here, really excited. And these two I don't really know that well, so I'm really excited to just get to know them here and, us learn about each other together. But I know that Shay is an incredible director, theater mind, writer, been doing a lot of great work and is the initial recipient of the SDC Lloyd Richards Directing Fellowship. And was the first person to receive that award. That's just among a few things, and she's currently at Cornerstone Theater in Los Angeles and going back and forth between Minneapolis and LA, right? And they also have beautiful family, and so it's hard, not easy to raise families in this business, ain't that right? Right? Be parents and to be artists is a journey in and of itself, So this is just again our group. But I want to go and let you all kind of speak for yourself a little bit in terms of just posing the first question of, what's your relationship to August Wilson's legacy, whether it's big or whether it's little, and how has his legacy kind of shaped your journey, your vision as an artist, scholar, or individual? And I'll just kind of let the crew chime in, whoever wants to go first. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 second. I also, just housekeeping, we are being live streamed by HowlRound, so just to let you all know, this thing is being live streamed. That's why we're talking into microphones as well, so people around can hear our conversation.
Yeah, I'll just say that, and I'll say a little bit more later, but what really just kind of struck me with that question right away was the last time that Amiri Baraka came to Minneapolis. He was one of E.G.'s mentors and had become a part of our family, just like Marion McClinton did. And so we did a project with him that spanned over like 6 months. But when he came to Minneapolis, he said, he was feeling a little bit fragile, just in his body and his spirit. So he didn't want to go a lot of places. He was like, where do we go? When do we jam? I just want to be with the musicians. He was really clear about the spaces that he wanted. He's like, when do we eat? Because we want to really eat. And then he wanted to talk to the children. But one of the things that he really wanted to do was to visit Penumbra Theater, and he wanted to just really talk about August Wilson, and the relationship with that theater. And I remember because the second day after he had gotten there, he wasn't feeling really well. And he was like, nah, I don't want, they put him on some kind of medicine. And he's like, nah, I don't want to go out. So it just ended up that he only had like 2 days left. But he was like, well, there's one thing I want to do, which he had already communicated when he first showed up. And Penumbra wasn't open. For some reason, I don't know what was going on, I don't know. But they weren't open. And I remember Lou Bellamy, we made some personal calls and et cetera. And I was like, he doesn't want to see a show. He just wants to be in the building. You know what I mean? He just wants to see the institution, the building, and be in the building. And then Lou Bellamy called us and was like, is it true that Amiri Baraka's in town? He wants to visit the centers, and so we just made it all happen. But it was one of those like grassroots experiences that reminds you, because when I think of Amiri Baraka, I think, again, the legacy of Black folks that have paved such a way, and in the same way that I think of August Wilson. And I just think there was something so humbling and so special in the way that he just kind of wanted to sit. When he got in the building, he just sat. He didn't like walk around or nothing. It's just like, he just looked at the walls, because there was quotes from August Wilson's plays on the walls. And he just sat there, and there was something emotional in the space. And so I guess that's just, I'm telling that story because it brings Baraka in the room, it brings August in the room, but also I think for me as a young artist, just just walking, standing on these shoulders of these giants, and it's like, what is that baton that's being passed, and how are we receiving it, and I just remember, when I went to see 2 Trains running, and again, it's just as a young artist, like, sitting, I don't know, in the last seat, and watching Black folks that looked like me on a stage, that held a certain authenticity, and just to like, I know her, I know him, like literally, like I know that guy, he's just like that uncle in Mississippi that I grew up with. That's what August means to me. When I go when I see the work, when I hear the work, when there's something that is so relatable, and I remember, and it's traveled alongside my own journey, as a writer, as a director, you know what I mean. And so that's kind of what.
It's interesting you say about Mayor Barack. I remember when I saw him as a first year in college at Oberlin College. He came into the room and he said, "Do you all listen to the walls?"
Yes.
He said, because the walls speak, so he said, when you come into a room, you got to know how to listen to the walls, because everybody who's been in that room is in those walls. And so to hear it,
It's funny that you would say that, because August named Baraka as one of his main influences. And I was thinking about, what does August Wilson say about freedom? Wally and I were just talking about this, so I must say what you said too. And I was thinking that the message is, know who you are, know your people, tell their stories, but most of all, stay connected to your African roots and grounding, because the freedom that the culture will offer you is never going to be guaranteed. There's always going to be a fight at every step, but we have what we need to be free in our spirit and land. That's what Wally said, and make sure you have your land. Well, I was thinking about the first time I met August in New Haven. He was an unknown playwright. And my friend Charles Rock Dutton had already been in the first reading of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, and he actually came to my apartment and said, "Oh my God, this is it. This is it. You will never, this is our next, greatest artist that we'll ever know." And, Rock went on to be in that first production of Ma Rainey. But one of the things I was asked to do as director of the Afro-American Cultural Center was to work with Yale Rap, who were producing the play, to help find an audience for this unknown play, when you think about it now. But he spent a lot of time, the early plays, through Joe Turner's Come and Gone, were rehearsed actually in the building that I ran. So I would hear on the other side of my wall, James Earl Jones, I would hear Mary Alice. And so, but I would watch August in his process, and he was always so clear about what he wanted. Now, I'm not saying he didn't have an artistic process where he, went through stages and changes, but once he arrived at what he wanted, he was very clear. Now, he let Lloyd Richards do what Lloyd Richards did, and Lloyd Richards was the kind of director that did not like actors who had to be coddled. He didn't have a lot to say. Their nickname for him was Buddha, including August, a nickname for him. But I would watch that relationship and to see when and where Lloyd would stop and step aside and listen to what August was responding to. But what was so amazing in those early years was to watch how quickly that work caught fire with the public. And, I got to see a lot of the plays like 10, 20, 30 times. They were there at the Rep right next door to me. I would just keep going. And, similarly to what Shay said, this way he captured the voices of the people he heard. And I'm thinking about I actually interviewed him for Black Mass magazine way early on. And I remember him saying, I can hear his voice saying, after he left school, he was saying, I went out on the avenue, and he talked about listening to the old man. I mean, I think most of us know this story now, but he talked about his early work, and I have heard a lot of his poetry. I think he did one of his last public poetry readings there in the center, because he came to think that poetry was private for him and playwriting was public. But I think when he moved from his early work, that he started here in the theater here, the Black arts community, I think when he set himself a task to listen to the stories of the old men, the guys that worked the railroad, the guys that were here in Pittsburgh, and he realized that this is what my job is, this is what my mission is to let these voices come through and to tell the stories I've heard. And I think, you know, we were just talking about in the house and the importance of his mother, and I remember him always telling stories about his grandmother who walked from the South. And I was thinking in terms of Juneteenth that he was so in touch with what freedom was and wasn't, what was promised. And Wally and I were just talking about how in Two Trains Running is the recognition that the North is not the promised land, but you better throw that $20 in the river, let Aunt Esther lead you. So I feel like I was able to watch that develop. But the last thing I'll say is, you know, I think most of us know Romery Bearden was one of his main influences also, in that 2 of the plays originated from Bearden work, and Joe Turner's Come and Gone and Piano Lesson. No, Fences. And so I remember him just standing kind of in my building, and he started talking in Maritha's voice. Maritha, you know, is a child in Piano Lesson who was in the mural, and he would, you know, same thing with Milhan's Lunch Bucket, the mural that influenced Fences, and he would say, well, who that baby? You know, like, who's that baby in Fences? Like, it was a man coming down with a baby. What happened? Where'd that baby come from? And he would say, I hear Maritha say, I'm not going to take my lessons. What's going to, you know, so I could just hear his voice in process. And the other thing that was so wonderful was that he liked to write in diners. Everybody knows this. He was a chef, and he was a cook in a diner, one of his many jobs. And he wrote longhand, at least till the end. In the beginning, he wrote longhand. And so he would smoke cigarettes and write longhand in the diners and then bring it in. And so it was just, I wouldn't be a director if I hadn't watched that process at all. And I don't think I would have the same feeling of being connected to a source of freedom that is always in what our ancestors have done to survive.
Thank you. Wow. I'd have to say that what immediately affects me about August Wilson, what it means to me, the legacy of August Wilson, primarily is opportunity. I didn't get into theater until I was in my late 30s. I always wanted to be in it. I always did. When I was going to Carrick High School, I wanted to take theater. My dear friend, Sheila McKenna, who has just closed a production of Misery, and she's one of the most prolific actors in this city. She was going there then, and she was in drama, and they told me I couldn't take drama because there wouldn't be any parts for me. And, you know, it was pretty much right, but that was before August. You know, see now, like, almost any high school kid can have an opportunity now to experience theater and portray characters that represent them clearly and respectfully and truthfully. And I didn't have that, but the desire stayed in me. I always wanted. I went to the point where I wanted to perform. I wanted to get up on stage in front of people and do stuff that I started doing stand-up comedy. Here in Pittsburgh, I was doing open mic night at the Funny Bone, used to be in Station Square, and these different nightclubs. And I mean, Pittsburgh audiences are brutal. You know, you better be funny, you know, and that added to having to write. If I can't rely on someone else's, you know, material, I can't steal somebody else's stuff, and if I want to get up there and I want to stand alone, I got to bring my own A game. So I would sit at home and I would think of funny stuff, you know, and I did impressions. So if you nailed the impression, you could say almost anything. You know, it's like, what are you doing? I like to play hopscotch. What are you doing? You know, if you can nail the voice, you know, like, what are you afraid of? You know, and like, so I built on that, and I had no idea how much I was going to bring with me once I did make it to theater. And then I just stumbled in on an audition in 1997. And I went in there and I didn't know what the heck I was doing, you know, and like, well, I'll tell you about this. I went to an audition for CLO in 1992. And I mean, I had no idea of blocking. What's CLO? CLO is Civic Light Opera here in Pittsburgh, and they are the ones that put on the Regaro Productions, Kinky Boots, and the Drowsy Chaperone, and all those great shows. And at that time, this gentleman named Don Brockett, who was on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood as Chef Brockett, was running the show down there. And so I went in off the street wanting to do theater. And I believe they were doing they were auditioning for a production of The Music Man. Sure, you could see me in that, right? Yeah, right? But I went in anyway, because it was in me, it drew me in there, and I'm like, there's Chef Brockett, I met him when I was 7 years old. You know, my mom took me to Mr. Rogers' studio right over in Oakland, and I went in there, he's like, what do you have for us? That's how he sounded. That's how anybody knew Chef Brockett, that's how he talked. And he was very nice. He was a very nice gentleman. And I said, I wanted to do some impressions for you. I mean, like, I had no idea of preparing a monologue, nothing. I was just dumb, you know, to theater. I mean, just totally, but I just wanted to get up there. So I did Bill Cosby. I did all kind of, you know, like, the jello pudding you got over there, you know, and I'm doing all these different impressions. And when I was done, people clapped, and he said, son, you have a magnificent ear. When people talk, you actually listen to them and hear them at the same time. I stole that from him. And years later, I stumbled onto an audition for Cantu Repertory Theater and walked in, a nobody, I mean, like, just never been on stage before, and walked out with the lead role. And I've been at it ever since, but like working. I finally found myself to it. But who started Cantu? Dr. Vernell Audrey Watson Lilly. Let's bring her into the room. Yes, Doc. She was my mentor. She was my Glinda the Good Witch. She was, sometimes she was, you know, that other witch. But while we were in rehearsal for the first play I was in, called Lifting by Frank Hightower, who, if you ever saw a picture of August Wilson standing among the ruins of the burned up supermarket, it was taken by the man who wrote the first play I was in. And while we're doing this, Dr. Lilly asked me, she said, you ever been in a play before? I was like, no. She's like, ever seen a play? Being facetious. I said, no. And she's like, really? And so next thing I know, we were getting in vans and heading to Baltimore to see Jitney. My first play that I ever saw in full production was Jitney. And it was a mind blower, and it just changed everything. I mean, for one thing, going to another city like Baltimore and seeing a jitney station that looked just like something on Center Avenue, just like something on Wiley, just like something on Heron. I was just, and I'm sitting there between Dr. Lilly and the director of the play, then Eileen Moore. She just directed this show, One Monkey Don't Stop in the Show, or something like that. It was a brilliant play. I wish I could have saw it, but I'm busy too. But brilliant director. And I sat there between them watching Jitney, and they are teaching me blocking. 101, right there. And it's like, see, he's sweeping, he's talking. He's sweeping, he's talking. He's going to do that exactly the way he's doing it. He's going to do it like that tomorrow night and the next night. That's what you got to do. You got to associate what you're saying with what you're doing. And they gave me this crash course into theater, and I just felt like a guy who just crawled in out of the desert to an oasis. because it's always, always, always what I wanted in August. Like, there was like 2 months after that production closed, this gentleman that I was in the play with, Mr. Mark Clayton Southers, and I'll get to it, anybody that knows him, he asked me if I wanted to participate in what he called the August Wilson Reading Roundtable, which is basically he had actors come to his house and we would read August Wilson's plays. And we would read plays that local playwrights had written too. And so August got wind that we were going to be reading Jitney with some media there. And he asked if he could read with us. I'm 3 months into theater. My blood pressure just dropped just thinking back. And I'm sitting next to this man, and he was reading the role of Turnbow. I was playing Fielding, the drunk jitney driver. He was playing Turnbow, the busybody jitney driver who was always in somebody's business and starting trouble. And August handled it. I mean, he made you hate him. Just like any other actor that's playing that role would do. He's creepy, just like he wrote it, like, okay. And we had a break. And me and August were the only people at that time that smoked cigarettes. I quit since then. But we went outside, and it was March here in Pittsburgh, in the Hill, and it was so cold on that porch, and I'm just standing there like, don't say nothing stupid. Don't say nothing stupid. Whatever you say, just don't say nothing stupid. And I said, so, do you have any advice for an up-and-coming playwright? I hadn't written anything, other than my little comedy stuff, And he said, write what you know. Just like that. Write what you know. And he said, what you don't know, research. But don't write what you don't know. And I'm thinking, I know Black history. So I started writing plays. I wrote this play called Legend of the Black Mariner. It was about a slave, it's a true story about a slave named Robert Smalls. I don't know if y'all know anything about it, but yes, people know about him. And I wrote this play called Legend of the Black Mariner, and it went through his life, and he did all those things. He became the most prolific riverboat steamship pilot as a slave by the time he was 15 years old in South Carolina. He knew those inland channels like the fjords of Norway. He was bad, and by the time the Civil War came around, they had him on their ships, the Confederate ships. He stole their ship, turned it over. They put him back on that same ship, commissioned him as an officer. He decorated, he made him captain of the ship. After he got out of there, he bought his master's house. Yes, in South Carolina. It still stands there today on Prince Street. He went on to serve on the South Carolina State Legislature. He went on to serve in Congress. He was a major general and the commander-in-chief of the South Carolina State Militia. He was the collector of customs for Charleston, one of the major seaports of the world. We got to know our history. But back to what I was talking about. We go back in. we go back in, and it won the playwriting competition at Caramoo House in 2003. Now back to that. Yes. But I said all that to say that reading that day was the seed that was planted that became what is now known as Pittsburgh Playwrights Theater Company, which has also done all of August Wilson's plays. It was the artistic director is Mark Clayton Southers. I wish he was here. He's a great man, and he just took the torch and kept it. And the significant thing to me about being the only actor who has done all 10 of his plays and how I learned what I learned is not that I did it, is that it was an actor from Pittsburgh that did it. And I said all that to say that.
You. Right, ask August Wilson character a question, you're going to get 5 stories. You're not going to answer the question, but that's right. That's really,
And like August said, he lets them talk.
Well, my first experience with August actually coincided with my moving to Minneapolis. The first theater show that I saw in Minneapolis was actually a Penumbra Theater, and it was a production of Piano Lesson. And it was directed by Marianne. And I was completely turned out. I mean, I had never, I'd studied African American literature and African literature, and I had done some theater in college, but that play just completely blew me away. It was my first introduction to August, and ironically, I didn't get a chance to meet Marion, but I would meet Marion a few years later, and then eventually end up working with him as his associate director. But to me, that was one of the most significant moments because it pushed me to, in the belief of being a Black artist trying to create Black work that talks about and deals with our culture and our history. And I really consider August as one of our just artistic godheads, along with Amiri and Toni Morrison, James Baldwin. And to me, he was able to just create the full realm and the fullness of Black life and Black history. It's a very challenging thing to sort of navigate and tell the full history of a people. And I look at August as a griot, because that's what the griots would do. The responsibility of the griot was to remember the history, and sometimes they remember 400, 500 years of history, and their task was to tell the history in the village and recite it so that we could remember our history. And to me, that's the mission and the task that August took on and was able to accomplish it. I know O'Neill, tried to do a similar thing, but I think August was really the one that was able to complete that kind of a mission. And it's not surprising that his influence would be Baraka in terms of what August feels molded him in terms of the Black Power movement, but also the kind of unvarnished truth that Amiri sought and really tried to put into his work. But also, Amiri has a collection called Wise, 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 where he tells the history of Africans in America through 40 poems and 40 short poems. And those two are the only ones that I've seen that are able to do that and do it at such a high art. And but when I was working with Marion, he hadn't, it was the later part of his life, and he wasn't traveling anymore and directing around the country, and he had stopped directing August's work. But Radio Golf was the only play that he hadn't done a full production of. But we had a chance to direct a reading of it when they did the Century Cycle at the Green Space in New York. And he had a chance to direct Radio Golf. And the thing about that experience was to see August's work also created a fraternity of August Wilson directors, of August Wilson actors, anybody associated and connected to that work is this sort of invisible society, this visible, invisible society. And when they all come, this was just an amazing experience because to have so many August Wilson children in one space, you understood the not just what the experience of that life on stage, but you saw it in person. To be a fly on the wall, sitting there, I was, one of the younger ones, kind of sitting there and just listening to the stories and the joy and it was phenomenal. And I wish that I kept thinking, man, if there was a camera crew or somebody recording this, the stories that were told, the joy that was in that room, the stories about August, and just the camaraderie and it was like this tribe that had worked together for like 15, 20 years plus. And it was just a phenomenal experience to be in that room, and then to see all 10 plays read in such a short period of time just showed you the monumental task that he took on and the expansiveness of this worldview that he created, and this the articulation of Black ethos and a Black reality that there's no other way to experience it but to see August's work.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, I don't think anybody's, ever captured, the speech of Black culture and the way that August Wilson has for the stage. Zora Neale Hurston, of course, really captured it in literature, but for the stage, August Wilson is so meticulous. If you've acted or directed any of his work, how much attention you have to pay to the language, is undeniable. And that his ability, as was kind of mentioned here, and this kind of lets you remind you of just the enormous debt we have to playwrights in general. They give us the vehicle for us to express ourselves. As Wally was talking about, you have so much of a community that has these dramatic impulses, right? But they don't have the paintbrush. And so much his plays have created a whole kind of legacy invitation for generations of folks to continue in his work.
And I think that, the fact that he was a poet, I think is critical.
Critical.
To him becoming a playwright, but to the language that he created. And it's deceptive because, sometimes I describe, the sort of everyday language of August's work, but it's deceptive because it is very precise and technical and poetic and musical in a way that it is everyday language that you can relate to and hear, and it's reminiscent of people that and the culture and heritage you come from. But there's such a musicality to it that is just it's where he takes it to a higher level.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, people often, because it's so colloquial and it sounds familiar, feel like they can freelance something. And to me, it's like ripping a hole in a quilt. It's so tightly woven, that you cannot take
Into
it
the
apart.
mic, I can't hear it.
It's so tightly woven that you really can't take it apart, which is a challenge for actors to speak language that is familiar, that you think but you have to get that crafted music, as you're saying, and I don't know how many people here have either acted or directed in the plays, but I know Justin, who's acting and directing right now, will tell you that it's a task, and it is a real theater task in the same way people talk about doing Shakespeare, which this is so mixed for me, this whole Shakespeare comparison, because the heightened use of language and August, the sense that how to take this language to another level was so unique and powerful to him, but the technique that you need is similar to what people think of in classic European-ish drama. It's just powerful.
Yeah. We were, in rehearsal, as 2 Trains Running, what we've run now is like 3-hour, it's a lot of play. And there's so many words, and we find in rehearsal so much, though,
A lot of them. He has a lot of those words.
But we discovered if you drop a line or word, it throws off, because the
Blows it
stories
up.
are connected
Right.
to one word
That's
that
right.
then comes back, and if you miss like one little sentence,
That's right.
it throws off the whole story, in a way and I struggled as a director, the director of like, wow, this play is so long, you know. And so for the first couple weeks, I was like, come on, we gotta speed it up. And we're ripping, like we got that music going, but it's still long, you know.
Yes.
And so then I had to realize, you know what, it's got to be, that's what it is, you know. And I was reading August Wilson's interview, you know, and a lot of people used to get on him for how long these monologues were, you know, and just like, you don't need these long monologues. And his response was, shut up and listen. You know, but he wanted people to listen to these people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so and it had me realize, well, you know what? We just have to earn it. We have to make people want to listen to these people for 3 hours, you
And
know?
I think that connects some of that tissue that you were saying earlier about like in this moment of freedom, and as we think about Juneteenth, right? And why now? But also, just the connection to freedom and August's work. I think there is something about this moment of now that threatens to like race us through life where we can't even like stop to take a breath and go, oh yeah, I just experienced that. You know what I mean? Like there's something that is inherent, I think, in the craftery of you got to just come and be there and sit there and listen and indulge. And so in that way, you know what I mean? Like there's most Shakespearean plays also are very long. And I see people complain.
Five
You know, I just think that's the other thing about freedom, right?
Yeah.
When we just think of the practicality of freedom, it's never come easy.
That's right.
It's always been a long road, yeah. And so, and there's all the bumps and the stories and the things that the connective tissue that some will remember and some won't. You know, some will take away, like you said, one of the words and not, you know, the phrases. Like my experience going to see this show, you know, when I see it tomorrow, maybe, I mean, some of the things that I take away that live in my gut in the immediate may be very different than what time it takes away. You know what I mean? Because of our own lived experience. But there's also all of those commonalities. But I think that part about freedom and the longevity of it, stay in the game, listen, you know, but allowing us to luxuriate, I think, in that musicality of the story and the life is what is unmistakably August.
And I think that's what the tie-in between August and Juneteenth means for us now. That in his plays, it's always stressed that you got to work. That you got to work, that freedom comes with work. All freedom means is that now we're going to work. But wait, we've been working for 300 years. Like, now we can work for ourselves. And that's what it's all about, freedom. Like in Two Trains Running, Memphis, he states it. He's like, you're talking about freedom? Freedom is heavy. You got to put your shoulder to freedom, put your shoulder to it and hope your back hold up. You know, and that's what, you know, he's telling us it's time to work. We got to get to work.
And I think that, you know, August sets an exemplary example for artists because he shows, you know, just like Amiri and Baldwin and Morrison, that when you grab that freedom for yourself in terms of your internal freedom, that I am free to create what I want to and need to create of what you're able to achieve, you know. And I mean, one of the most wonderful and amazing part of, you know, working with Marion for so long, and you know, I would go to his house and we would just sit. He always had a movie on. I mean, you walk in Marion's house, there's always, and it's usually Law and Order. I mean, that man must have watched every episode of Law and Order like 10 times. And every time
Didn't he
like,
direct a couple?
I work with that actor, and I work with that actor.
Yeah.
And he would just give resumes of everybody.
Yeah.
And but Marion always told this story about, you know, the date of the boxing match. And,
7 guitars.
and people would always correct August, and I was like, I don't care. This is what I needed from my play, and it's right in my play. It has the right date in my play. You deal with it, you know. And very similar to Lauren Carlos, you know. And Lauren would be like, just do whatever the damn thing that you need to do the work that you need to do.
Yeah.
And keep it moving. And she also said, if people aren't walking out of your show, you ain't doing nothing right. And
You-
so,
I'm glad to hear you say that because I was telling Justin earlier that one of the things I witnessed in the development of what I call the August Wilson story, which is the whole superstructure of now producing these plays for more and more people in more and more places. In the first production of Fences, they were up against a producer who wanted something changed at the end of the play. I have to laugh about this. And this is what he said to me: I lived on a dime before I lived on a dime. I can live on a dime again. These motherfuckers are not changing my play. And so that sense of freedom to create was very literal for him. And I often think about him walking out of formal schooling at 9th grade. I remember him talking about going to the public library and reading the Negro Shelf. We used to laugh about that, like in our day, it was the Negro Shelf. But I was thinking that in a way, he was not institutionalized, that his education was in the street, because when he said, when I was 20, I went out on the avenue when he was looking for the blues records, when he was, we had a conversation between he and Toni Morrison that we engineered, and he talked about finding the bluest eye for 10 cents in a bin, and how that just galvanized him and changed him. But because of the way he grew up here in Pittsburgh, because of the life he created for himself, because of the complexity of Black storytelling that he sat at the feet of the masters, he was uncompromising in terms of what would be done with his work. Once he crafted it, I was just thinking about this thing about when I went to see Fences at the O'Neill. So Charles Dutton came back and told me he had been in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom at the O'Neill Festival in Connecticut, which Lloyd Richards also ran, which is where his Ma Rainey was accepted for the first showing of a work in a larger for a larger audience. So the next summer I went back and they were doing Fences. So this is about the craft also. What the O'Neill did was you had 2 nights to have the play read by a dynamite group of actors, basically, unit furniture, looking at scripts. The first night it was 4 hours long. Okay. The next night it was 3 hours long. I mean, he actually went back and was able to recraft that play into the powerful play we know now. There were some people, dramaturgs, who would give advice, but he was so attuned that he could go in and edit as well as he needed to and still have that tightly knit quilt and that music the way we hear it. But I was just thinking when you all were talking, especially when you said, Shay, the complexity of Black storytelling, when you said griot, that listening, Black storytelling is not direct. It takes a journey, just like Black people take a journey. And this patience and letting the plays be longer. When the plays first went to New York to Broadway, people would say, it has to be over before the last commuter train. And they were like, no, no, that's okay. So, and I think about the first half hour of Ma Rainey, where the musicians are talking, and you have to get in the world with them. You have to wait the way they're waiting. You have to hear why their stories exist and how that pushes the play. So, yeah, thank you, everybody, for what you're sharing.
I'm just wondering, this is a little bit, kind of a different question, but August Wilson was so unapologetic of his use of the N word.
Yep.
In his.
Speaking of people
That
walking
was so
out.
important of the authenticity of the characters and their voice. And I'm just wondering, if you all think that it poses a challenge to modern audiences or an opportunity. Is it a challenge or an opportunity?
I'll tell you, unrelated. I was in a no, wait.
Black
wait,
storytelling.
Wait,
Black
hear me
storytelling.
out. Hear me out.
Black
I was
storytelling.
walking down the street.
There was a production. Check it out. There was a production of The Little Foxes that I was in, and it was at the Pittsburgh Public Theater. It was my first equity show, and for those of you who don't know this play, it takes place in 1900 in a mansion in Alabama, and I played one of the servants. And the play, when it debuted, it was by Lillian Hellman, great, brilliant playwright. When it debuted, the word The N-word was in it about 130 times. And it was widely accepted at the time. I even had a friend of mine, an older white gentleman, who told me that he saw the play when he was in high school, and his uncle played my role in blackface. Yeah. Yeah. So there was a whole lot of stuff that was accepted then. But in this production, Ted Pappas, bless his heart, he took the word out, just took it out. And I was like, why do you do that? You know, like, what's he scared of? So I wound up asking him. I just went ahead and asked him. Like, you know, like, you didn't do that, you know, for my benefit, no. He's like, no. He said that the word has become a distraction to my audiences. And while they hear that word, they're sitting there saying, I'm just not comfortable with that word. I just don't like hearing that word. And while they're sitting there doing that, they're missing this otherwise brilliantly written play. So in that case, it seemed like a pragmatic thing to do. But with August, no.
But you know, we've had people walk out on our show.
Yes, we have.
Because
Black people.
There's too many niggas in the show.
Yeah.
There's
There's just too many niggas there.
That's right, you know.
You can't count the niggas in that show.
But I go back to Lori because if people ain't walking out, then you might not be doing something. But for me, I don't know what the American impulse is to be scared of history. I don't understand it. It's just really confusing to me because that's what's happening now. It's a whitewashing of history and textbooks, and eventually it gets to the art. And it will be the N-word, and then it will be the N people. You know? And so I think, and the thing is, we are not children. We are not. You do those things to protect children. But isn't theater meant to discomfort the comfortable? So, you know, I'm not an advocate for it. I'm not an advocate for it being taken out of a Huckleberry Finn either. You know? It should be taken out of
Especially Huckleberry
It should
Finn.
be taken out of August. It should be taken out of any work.
Talk about it and contextualize it with the people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to be confronted with it
Right.
because those are the realities that we went through. And what August and Amiri and Morrison and Baldwin and Achebe, they are showing you the facts and reality of what we had to endure. Because if you don't face the facts and reality of what you have had to endure, you won't know what you have to navigate and what you need, what the strength you need to be able to move forward and create a new reality. We want to create a reality where that word does not have the kind of power it does. However, we have to face the reality of our history. That is the whole idea of Sankofa. If you can't face your history, who are you going to become? And if we need to become who we need to become. And so we have to look back at our history and understand where we come from in order to know where to go. And so I'm not an advocate.
You know, it's tough though because like just getting a little bit of the other side of that, right? Like my great grandfather was a slave. You know, like my father remembers, and the thing about it is nobody could ask him about it. That was the rule. You know what I'm saying? And still so much with our elders, the elders who experienced that extreme trauma that was happening in the South, you know, I think it's still hard for us to speak it, to say, you know what I'm saying? Because these stories carry so much pain for, you know, and I feel like we are still trying to navigate that balance of the pain that these stories carry and these words carry, and also the need for the younger generation to know about that pain so they can appreciate what they have today. You know, because also it's not just the older white people who are walking out on the niggas in the show, it's the young people.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And young black people, even some who just feel like that's traumatic, you know? And in a lot of like theater departments and some of your, you know, it's tough as far as like what you can produce in a collegiate setting, you know, if you're trying to do, you know, an octoroon or something, if you put up an octoroon at a college, it's gonna, you know, so again, there's no easy, you know, trying to balance all those pieces, I guess I'm just saying, you know?
I think that that's part of the work. And I feel like there's no way to get around the real work. And so we really are talking about theater and making theater. It's not just once the play is done and put up there and you come in there for your 2 or your 3 hours. It really is a holistic, it should be a holistic experience. And so how are we setting the work up? But then that's a whole nother long conversation, right? Also about how do you set that playwright up? You know, I've read a lot of the stories about who made place and like real belonging for August, you know, and the places where he was like never gonna go there again. So I wonder about right now too, like where are we getting our productions produced? What is the package that truly makes place and belonging for us, so that when our young folks come in, they already know. They know you're gonna see some stuff, you're gonna hear some stuff. You may not, your mama might be okay with it and you might not. This is the reason why we're presenting it to you. You know what I mean? And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have come for our discussion beforehand. So I just think we have to start approaching and demanding that those of us that produce, those of us that are playwrights, et cetera, in the ways that our audiences are going to experience the work. Because if it's not going to be experienced fully, I say no to it. Say no to it. You know what I mean? I'm like, nah. And you can feel it. You can feel it a lot of times. We were just talking in a conversation this morning about the New York Times article that, you know, they interviewed 4 black artists about racism, you know, how racism corrodes American theater. And a quote by Lydia Diamond, and she was just saying, I feel it in every, she said, I'm gonna say this and I'm not gonna get produced again, but here is the moment to speak truth. But she said, I feel it in every part of the process. And that hurts when you hear that. She's like, and even in the theaters that I love and that love me. And that's some deep stuff to write. She's like, she's like, and then, you know, I could go on with anecdotal from the marketing to the reviews to the, you know, the audience interaction to the forgetting that you should have done this thing with the students. I mean, there's just so, from being produced in the smaller theater, from the timelines, not considering, you know, that we gotta spend time with our community. I mean, the list goes on. And so I just think better, do better, work harder, fight for what we know we need. And those are the things that I love about August. You know, like that generation, they were like, nope.
No.
You know, like when Mary, he was like, hell no.
No.
How much they paying? Nah.
Nope.
No.
Nope.
You can't. You know, they would just say no.
No, that's the
But
meaning
a lot
of
of
the
times
Black
now,
Arts, right.
there's a lot of saying yes. And then going back to like, but can you, and can't, you know, and, you know, begging. And it's like, this, we don't have to beg. This is ours. It's by right. It's already ours. And so how do we really claim that space that's ours right now?
I do think what Justin was saying about trauma is so, I think the genius of August is how he helps us process that trauma, because immediately I'm thinking about the scene with Bynum and Harold Loomis. Harold Loomis is just frozen. He just cannot move on. And what did he need? He needed that African griot. He needed that whole other way to get that song out. And so in the work, you really have that. But going to your point, Shay, going back to the August Wilson story and what protected him, it really was Lloyd Richards. I cannot give enough praise to Lloyd Richards, because he had achieved a position no other black man really had, which was to have 3 hats, which is head of a drama school, head of a rep theater, going to TCG, and also that he was head of the O'Neill. He had all 3 of those hats. So once he was able to see the genius in August, he could bring it to Yale and they could have protection. And the other thing that was so powerful, and this is going to TCG, is that after the first couple plays suffered with white producers, because I met some of these white producers who did just what you're saying, wanted to control and shape and didn't get it. They went to a different model of producing, and it had to do with partnering with other regional theaters so that they built their way to Broadway as their own producers. And and so that they had to select which regional theaters. Would you be able to do the work in the responsible way that it was being crafted? And that does come all the way back to the question about nigga. When Justin said this before, I said, my answer is 5 words. Richard Pryor, that nigga's crazy. Because that is how we all talked and heard the word. And what August has done with that word is, I'm thinking about the Little Foxes story. He's done what the black community did, which is to reshape that word in their own, for their own use. Do I agree with that or not? Richard Pryor also went on to, eschew the word nigger later after he went to Africa. I didn't see any niggers, so he stopped. But what August has done, and part of that music and the text what we were talking about and who these people are, is he's embedded it with not just the word, but the depth of context that the black community made with that word. And that needs to be heard as much as the original pieces that used it in the killing way that it was meant. So you get to hear the fullness. So this is what I tell my students. I'm like, if you try to say N-word while you read something from August Wilson, well, he might jump up and slap you and I'll be right there next to you. Because you are really then trashing the people who are being represented, the culture that's being represented, the history that's being represented, and most of all, the joy of how we play with words and what we do with them.
Yeah, I want to open it up a little bit because we only got about 15 more minutes and just give people in the audience an opportunity
Justin, can I ask you one question before you do that?
Yes.
What do you see as the future of this canon, and how, I always worried about this is, okay, if 400 years later, Shakespeare, anybody can do it. What happens as this legacy goes on? But what do you see as the legacy of the future and the future of the canon?
One, I think it's important for us to keep doing the work, because we take for granted, a lot of great plays just don't get done anymore. They happen once or twice. And so, I think August Wilson has really kind of given us a legacy that can withstand time, and I think it's important for us to do it. I think we are at a moment where it's like moving into a new generation. For the past iteration, there has been a real tight fraternity and a real tight idea about what doing an August Wilson play looks like and sounds like. And it's always got to kind of look and sound a specific way, in a way that I think as it moves beyond into the next generation has got to loosen up a little bit, And doing my research, August really, he wrote the plays in terms of I asked Memphis what to say. They were specific people to him, you know what I'm saying? That's how he needed, in order to write the play, they were very specific people. And I think a lot of time in creating them, there's been a little bit of a move to create that person, From an artistic and an acting standpoint, I think, though, there has to always be room for the actor to bring who they are into the character. That's, as a director and as an actor, that's what's the interesting part of our art, That, none of these characters exist on stage until the actor brings who they are into the role, And so for me, I'm just, as a director, interested. I think that a little bit has happened in terms of there's a lot of people, black people, who don't feel like they have a right to August Wilson because they can't speak that way, or they don't have that authentic of a black experience, And I'm interested in empowering the next generation of black actors to find themselves through the work without trying to be Anthony Chisholm or Stephen McKinley Henderson, and love those guys. You know what I'm saying? They're beautiful, but you don't have to be that in order to do August Wilson.
Yeah, but I also think too that and this is more from a directorial standpoint. I think it would be great to have sort of a training ground, because it has been a fraternity, and it was almost like you had to have certain credentials in order to be able to direct. Marion would talk about it. It was like Lloyd, then Marion, then Kenny, and then Ruben. There's been sort of this handing off the baton.
Yep, that's right.
But it has been in the last 4 or 5 years that has really opened up where it is canonized in a way where it's being done in so many different places. Yeah. Before it was not only specific to the character, but just specific to the actors, the directors,
that's right,
and who had permission. Sure. Because within themselves they would say,
And
he's
even
just
the
a visual
designs,
director.
you know,
That's
in
right.
August's lifetime, he did not want to see a non-naturalistic design. You know, so even to that extent, his vision was pretty complete. So yes, moving on.
Yeah,
Right? How do we
and
move
I
on?
think there should be, and I don't know how that gets done, but some kind of way of where, you know, because there is going to be a dilution that happens, because there isn't that sort of firsthand experience. I think part of where there was sort of that passing of the baton was to keep the authenticity
Yeah.
of the work intact.
Yeah.
Right here at the August Wilson Cultural Center.
Right.
Yeah.
We started
Yeah.
training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
And
Well, and I'm interested in again,
Yes.
finding the infinite possibilities of blackness. I think blackness is inherent to, I don't think the canon is ready to move outside of blackness and black actors coming in. But I think in terms of gender, I would love to see an all black woman Ma Rainey. You know what I'm saying? In terms of and seeing what that is. But right now, the grip is too good. You try and do something like that, and it's no. August didn't write that. He didn't want that. But as we move into classical, it can the text can handle it, And the production is not going to jeopardize the legacy of the text. That's what the good thing about a classic is. It's already established. So that's the type of stuff that I'm excited about too.
Right. Anybody? Anybody out there?
EB, do you want to say? When he had to play King Hedley II.
Well, if you don't, I have this one last little thing. I'll tell you what, going into this, being known as the only actor in the world to have performed in all of August Wilson's stuff can be a good thing, but it can also, I thought that there would be much trepidation with a director casting me, because a director may think, I ain't gonna have this nigga telling me everything and shit, hey, he don't know everything. He's gonna be a pain in the ass. Every time I try to do something, he's gonna say, no, that was this. And I did none of that. Justin will tell you. I did none of those things. I gave ground. I stayed in my lane and only shared when called upon. Except a few other times when it was appropriate, when appropriate. And there was enough space in silence that I was able to go on in there. So it's a very, right? But it's something that you must always give ground to your director. It's their vision, regardless of what you see, what you know. If you're a professional actor, you've got to be able to take direction. Even though I did Gem of the Ocean 4 times, and I was a different Caesar every time. I was in 7 Guitars 3 times. I played Canewell the first time. That's where I learned to play harmonica, because Canewell plays harmonica. I got to that part in the script, and it says he blows the tune on harmonica. I was like, what? And I went out and got me a harmonica, and I learned how to play. And now I can jam. Now I can jam with Ruben, So it's a learning experience every time for an actor, and you got to find that person. It's a journey, and you got to let the leader lead. I made the reference that the director of a play is a general contractor, and we got to build a house. He lays out the plans. That's the script. He assigns the jobs. Okay, Wally, you're the electrician. Shay, you the plumber. All right, my man E.G., you gonna do the HVAC. And that's how it's assigned. Each role has a different job, and that's how you assign it. And the director says, you don't put that fountain over there. It says right here in the script, it goes here. And I can't put it more simply than that. And Justin is just so open and knows what his vision is, and that's a blessing.
Yeah, thank you, brother. But for real, come see the show tonight if y'all interested. We have an incredible company, and we're in the round, which is really different. Yeah, it's in the round.
You smell my cologne.
Yeah, and you can sit on the stage if you want. There's seats that are on the stage that are really interesting. So, But that's just a little plug.
Yep.
Anybody want to say anything? Yes, please.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you all so much. Like, I'm so full right now, right? Because I was one of the people, one of those August Wilson babies, you know, who cut my teeth on August Wilson. I'm
Yeah.
a number theater company member of 25 plus years.
Yes.
Lou Bellamy, Mary McClinton, Lori Carlos, those are my mentors. The play that he was talking about that he first saw, I was in that play. This is my sister, my brother. You guys are repping Minneapolis and the whole. I'm so proud of y'all. I'm gonna report back good things.
Someone's always.
And just talking about, you know, like for my whole resume, if it wasn't for August Wilson, part of my resume would have been empty because I was not one of these theater babies who, I mean, I went to the school and stuff, but I was raw. You all know, you know, so I didn't have to learn how to speak the language. I spoke the language. And because I spoke the language, I was able to work. And so it was kind of like on-the-job training, on the boards with J-Dub, and Kenny directed me, and Jimmy the Ocean and Radio Golf. We did it in rep at the Alliance. I was able to do something, radio golf again, at Trinity Rep. Like, I did 7. I didn't do all of them, but I did 7. And it's just really wonderful to be one of those people. Met August, of course, to be able to grow up on August Wilson. To be on the boards with some of the most amazing artists. And like you said, you have to let the director lead. And those words, they're so critical and so crucial. You drop one. But the beautiful thing about it is that most of the time, all of the time, I was on the boards with people. If I dropped it, they knew how to pick it up.
That's a
You know what
blessing.
I mean? They just knew how to pick it up. And this right here, keeping his legacy going is just, I'm so full, you know, because I was thinking about it. Like the other day, like, we're not talking about August enough anymore. Like, we can't let him die. And look at my prayers are answered because here we are in this center at this time with all of you speaking so eloquently about him. You know, speaking to my history as an artist. You know, I'm just full. That's all I can say. Because of August Wilson, I am here. I am here. I am here. And I was able to get on the boards when nobody else would let me up there. I got up there, and as wretched as I was at the time, I got to be my fully realized self, and I was honed into this beautiful artist, partially because of August Wilson and all the people who took chances on me, and I didn't have to relearn how to talk. I was just able to be. So this is beautiful. Thank you all so much.
And I would say that's a common story. I mean, that's a very common story with a lot of August Wilson acolytes.
Hi, I'm one of the young ones. Hi. So I went to a PWI. I'm going to tell the school because whatever. I went to SCAD in Savannah, and I had a lot of trauma at that school. So when I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, True Colors, Kenny Leon. That was the first time I ever experienced August Wilson. Honestly, in 2021. And I realized, oh, okay, I am actually terrified of this because of when you were talking about an octoroon, that was where my trauma came from because it was a white director who told me that I needed to slave it up in the audition. And so that's when I was like, okay, I think I need to get a little bit closer to my ancestors and to my history. So I started working at the Atlanta History Center where we did museum theater. And I was a first-person interpreter, which means that yes, sometimes was in the enslaved cabin, dressed as an enslaved human being, but we changed that around. You come into this enslaved cabin, you are going to respect it. And we had to tell those stories. And once I started learning more true history, not this whole whitewash stuff that the Sisters of the Confederate Daughters wrote in the Texas history books, I know my history. And I'm very proud that I know my history. And because now that I know my history and how deeply August Wilson puts the true stories of Black culture and Black history into his plays, it makes me feel now like I can actually do this. I don't have to deal with the traumas of going to PWIs and not feeling Black enough. It's truly changed my entire life because now I am a co-founder of the Tiny Theater Company in Atlanta, Georgia, which it is FUBU, for us, by us. No BIPOC, no nothing, for us, by us, and we do Shakespeare shows, but it's all Black. And we have done Romeo and Juliet, where it's love and basketball. We have done Othello, where we're talking about Morehouse and Spelman and all of that. So August Wilson, even though I'm just now learning about him, it's the history that really connected me to him, because I am a history buff, and I actually just came from the History Center here and was able to walk through slavery to freedom, that whole thing. Now, there were some things I was wrong, but other than that, it truly was beautiful. And the fact that I was able to see this, talking about Juneteenth, talking about August Wilson even more with their history, it just gets me more excited to go back to Atlanta and just show them, like, I got this. So I really appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Did you know that when August first moved to Minneapolis, he wrote museum? That was one of his first paid jobs as a playwright, was writing those museum dramas.
Yeah. Well, we are coming to the end. It's 3:30, you all. Whew, thank you all so much, though, for being in this room, bringing all this energy and Ashe to us. Hopefully this conversation can be continued on as you go on out and as you continue through the conference. Thank us all, our wonderful panelists, Caroline Jackson-Smith, Wally Jamal, E.G. Bailey, Shay Cage, and I'm Justin Emeka. Y'all have a blessed and wonderful weekend.